What's up, breathing people? Welcome back. If it's your first time here, I'm JC. I'm joined by my wife, Brittany. And if you don't know anything about what we do on this channel, we talk about three things. We make it real simple. We talk about communication, we talk about relationships, and we talk about self-development. We want you to be better in all three of those areas because we believe if you get better in those three areas, you'll have a better life. And that's ultimately what we want for you. So today, we're talking about something that honestly, I only learned maybe 3 years ago from an emotionally healthy relationships course that I took. And the concept, they called it something else, but the thing that they were teaching was the importance of active listening. And what active listening is, and I'm just going to use the definition so I don't screw this up, but it's a practice of preparing to listen, which is a really important thing that we'll get into, observing what verbal and nonverbal cues a person's giving off, and then providing appropriate feedback for the sake of showing attentiveness to the message being presented. So as you can see, there's things that you're doing while hearing the person. So that's what makes it different from passive listening, which you do in a workplace, which you do when you're having to take a lot of communication from different people. You can't always make eye contact. You can't always provide feedback or ask questions or anything like that. So it's a little different in the way that you listen. So it's a really important thing though for both your communication with people and in relationships especially. I would say for the majority of your communication practices, active listening is going to take place mostly in close relationships.
Yeah.
So this would be with your children, this would be with friends, and this would be especially with a significant other. So your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend, that's really where you're going to use this skill and where it's going to be so valuable in your relationships. So we're going to talk about that. I'm just going to start off with a quote. And this quote it really struck me hard when I heard it for the first time. This is from David Augsburger. Yes, I said that right. That's a tough name. But it said, being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable. So like the thing that we're really trying to get to today when we talk about active listening and how to improve that in your relationships is you're trying to love people better. And we know this just from ourselves. When you feel heard, when you feel known, you feel loved.
Yeah.
And that's really the elements involved in active listening.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into more of the specifics of how you do it. We're going to talk about how we've done it in our own lives, but that's the focus for today. So if that sounds good to you, stick with us through this podcast. I already went through the differences between passive and active, so I don't want to hit on that again, but just know that you don't need to bring this active listening into every relationship, into every, workplace or school or, a more communal relationship. This is something when you're really trying to get close to somebody that you use this practice.
And I would say that it's going to propel you forward, like you said, the most in those intimate relationships. But even in the workplace, like I've had supervisors and bosses that have been really good listeners.
Yeah.
And that actually does really make a good leader because you know that when you bring something to them, they're not just listening to like appease you. You know that they're listening and they care and they're probably going to do something about it.
Right.
And that, I would consider that active listening too.
Yeah.
Instead of just like, back and forth with instructions or whatever, which would be the passive, right? Like do that and you're just listening and you're doing your job.
Kind of responding.
Right.
Kind of that immediate response.
Which is what you need at that time.
Right.
But then there's a time for active listening. And I think a lot of leaders in workplaces, good leaders, do that well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the difference between those two. The primary focus of active listening is understanding.
Yeah.
And as we get into telling our story, as we get into the specifics on how to do this in your own life, keep that in mind. Keep that focus of you're trying to understand the person better. And like I said, that goes to being heard, being known, and feeling loved. So understanding is something as you do this practice, because it might be awkward, you know, especially when we get into how to practice this, it's awkward because we're not good at it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing to know in everything that we talk about on this channel. You're probably not going to be really good at these things. That's why we talk about them, because we know that if you did get good at them, it'll improve your life.
Yeah.
And that's usually the way that we get better in life is by doing things we're not good at now.
Yeah. You usually notice that you're not. I mean, when it comes to active listening, it's usually you notice you're not good at it.
Right.
And so you have to be intentional. That's part of active listening too, is being intentional about when you want to do that. Like if you're like, okay, I'm really bad at listening to my spouse, you know, when they come to me after work and like are kind of letting me know what happened at work and what they're frustrated about, but I'm kind of half on my phone, half listening. It like takes that intentionality to be like, okay, let me just put my phone down and like clear my mind from what I was thinking about to listen to what my spouse is saying.
Yeah.
And so I'd say intentionality is like the first step to trying to listen to understand.
Right. Well, let's get into our story and kind of weave those, because there's a couple different elements that I think need to be present whenever you're doing active listening in a relationship. And like you said, I do agree that it can be in a work context, especially if you're a leader.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially if you're a supervisor, if you're a leader of any kind for a team, you know, you can definitely improve the morale. You can definitely improve the relationships between your team through using at least abridged elements of active listening practices, where I would say if you're trying to get deeper in relationship with somebody, you want to go all out. You want to really dig into the practices that we're going to teach today, because that's really where you're going to see growth in the depth of your relationship.
Yeah.
And it's really, really important. So our story, do you have something that you want to start with, or you want me to go?
You start.
Okay. So I am that person that thought they were good at listening until you dig into the practice of active listening, understanding its purposes and seeing how that plays out in relationships. Then you realize you don't have a clue about listening like I thought I did.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a little disheartening because I was like, I hear.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I hear, I respond.
You're an auditory learner.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm fine with listening to things. But like you said, putting down the distractions, setting aside time, making sure that I am communicating back to the person in a way that they know I heard exactly what they said. I didn't interpret. I didn't, you know, kind of automatically come back with a fixed solution, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
Once I learned that those elements need to be in place for you to actually listen well, I was like, oh,
yeah,
I really haven't been doing this well in my relationships. And that included my relationship with you. That included my relationship with the kids, especially. Like just being able to, you know, you kind of hear different parenting practices like, you know, come down to their level.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're like, okay, that's kind of an easy, I need to just kneel down when I talk to my kids.
Right.
Because speaking is a part of listening as well. You know, you need to be intentional in the way that you speak as well as how you listen. And maybe we can talk about that later too. But so I knew kind of the practices, like kind of good practices, but I didn't know that kind of deep ways in which my listening can help you feel loved.
Yeah.
You know, feel known, feel actually heard by me. Like I thought by me answering your either questions or statements to me, you know, with some type of solution or response, you would just know that you were heard.
Yeah.
Which is such an interesting thing to think about. And I want everybody to kind of go with me on this. we think when we respond to somebody to what they're saying, they feel heard, but that's not necessarily the case. Making sure by repeating back to a person what they said, at the very least, in a way that is close to what they said. Maybe it's not verbatim, maybe it's not word for word, but at least is the heart of what they're talking about. Man, that makes a huge difference in them actually feeling heard, because it goes beyond just the auditory, I heard what you said because I'm answering it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, no. There's a feeling of being heard that's deeper than the auditory, I heard you.
I think subconsciously we kind of know when somebody is listening to understand and taking the time to care. I don't think we like think it all through, but I think we just know because we do it ourselves. Like, I know one thing that I've noticed about myself as like I've learned about how to listen well, I've seen how I don't do it well, and I can look back in the past and see, oh, I used to do this and it wasn't good. But I think one thing that I know I used to do, and sometimes I still catch myself doing it, is as I'm listening, I have an agenda of my own first. And then I also have like assumptions of what the person is meaning. So instead of me being open-minded, like I'm trying to understand, you know, what you're saying, I'm like, I think I know where this is going.
Right.
And so I'm trying to control it from the beginning, and I have my own agenda. So I'm listening to get my, like, to either like protect or like get my point in, which is really bad listening. Not good active listening. But yeah, like to go into like between us, like I know I used to do that a lot earlier on when we were married, and I didn't know I was doing that even until like I have read some books that like just brought it to my mind. I was like, oh, I'm doing that when I talk to you. It's not good. But yeah, so I know for us, I feel like we've recently gotten a lot better at listening, and it's meant a lot, I think, to our relationship, because I know I will speak more openly with you because I know that you're listening and that you care. And I also have seen how you respond. And so I feel safer to say what's on my mind. And that, I mean, as we'll talk about, but that grows a much deeper connection.
Right.
Like a closeness, and also, like you're saying, a feeling of being loved, because when you know that someone's listening to you, you feel known, like we said, and it's that knowing and then that acceptance of that person, like not just running away or rejecting you, that then you feel loved.
Right.
And so your response matters. You can listen actively and then reject that person, and that cuts deep because now you've been known, but you've been rejected. Yeah. And so the response from the listener does matter. But yeah, for us, I feel like it's been really helpful and also eye-opening to know, okay, I have to do a better job at listening to other people too. Right. In general, as you get better at it, you realize how much more better you have to get. Yeah. I guess. But I guess
more better.
Yeah. More better.
More better. Betterer.
Betterer. But with our kids, I know recently I wrote like my own like personal like mission statement. Yeah. And that was like, I don't know.
You have to talk about why you did that, because that sounds crazy. Like I've done that for businesses. I've done that for organizations I've been a part of, but like, why did you write a personal business statement?
It's not a business. It's not a business.
Well, a personal mission statement.
A personal mission statement. I know it sounds weird. I wrote it because, well, first in the book, the five habits of successful people, it had talked about something like that. I don't know if they call it that, but I loved that idea because
7 habits. 7 habits.
Oh, is it 7? Thank you. Yeah. I'm still on 2.
I just don't want people to look up,
don't look up 5
habits.
I'm still on number 2.
I'm sure there's a 5 habit book out there, but I'm reading 7 habits of highly effective people.
Thank you. Yeah. I totally thought it was 5. Okay. I'm only on 2 though. So
you're only on 2.
That's in my defense.
You're not there yet.
But yeah, so that is what gave me the idea. Mm-hmm. And then I noticed that I desire things for our relationship and for my relationship with my kids and with just people around me in general that I want, but I'm living like I don't want it. if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I want my relationship with you and my kids and friends and even strangers, I want it to look a certain way, but I'm acting like I don't care. And I was like, this is not okay with me. And so listening was part of that, like bringing it back to listening. Listening was part of that for the kids. I notice that I'm easily distracted because I'm doing so much in the day. When they talk to me, I notice that like I barely ever make eye contact with them. Like I am listening, probably not actively.
Right.
But I'm listening, but not actively. And I was like, that's going to hurt their hearts. Like, I want them to know that I care because I do care.
Right.
So I wrote like part of the mission statement for my kids is that like, I'm going to show that I love and care for them by looking in their eyes when they speak and listening to understand their hearts. And so that's like just a small part of it. But part of how I want to intentionally be when they talk to me. So now I try to read that every day to remind myself so that when they're talking, I can just be like, can you hold on a minute so I can finish this task? Or if it's a task that I can like wait, I'll like put it down and I'll be like, okay, let's put these thoughts to the side. What are you saying? You know, even though a lot of times it's like very silly stuff, but they care about it. So I want to care about it. Yeah, so that's why I wrote a personal mission statement.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. I think the key word, going back to the first part of what you said, was safe. You know, you felt safer when I was listening better.
Yeah.
Or we felt that I was listening better. And there is a difference. There is like, okay, he got, you know, the context of what I said or the material of what I said, but that doesn't always mean you feel listened to.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you feel heard.
Right.
And that comes with, I think, more of these practices of active listening that maybe we can talk about now.
Yeah.
Is that a good place to transition? Because I think like we want to just talk about our story to just show people that we're on this journey to get better in our communication, relationships, and self-development with you.
Yeah.
This is not a journey that we have come to a pinnacle on.
Which I don't think you can.
No, I don't think so. I think you always are getting better in all of these
There's room
things.
for improvement always.
And just as we're learning, as we're getting better in something, we're going to share that information with you. And so this has been an area that has really, really helped improve our marriage, improve our relationship with our kids. So we want to invest that in you. And I think the biggest strength of active listening is the understanding, which builds trust.
Yeah.
And trust, to go back to what you said, builds safety.
Yeah.
Like that's the progression. Is once you understand somebody and once someone feels understood by you, then you can trust them more. And if you can trust somebody in a relationship, you feel safe with them.
Yeah, yeah.
And safety builds connection. Safety is what actually builds, like when people are like, I fell out of love. I think you fell out of trust. Like I feel like there was something that didn't happen in the relationship that made you feel unsafe or, you know, made you not trust that person as much, which probably was a lack of understanding on either party's part.
Yeah.
That led to, I don't feel love for them anymore.
Yeah.
So I guess I just need to move on. Problem is with moving on, you're going to go to another relationship.
And you're going to do the same thing.
We're going to do the same thing. So learn this now so that you, in any relationship in the future, can have a better track record of loving those people. And I don't care if it's friends or, you know, spouses or whoever, your kids, you know, you can love them better through this.
And I think the beautiful thing about this too is the strengthening trust is that with active listening, you build that trust like piece by piece. So each time that you listen well and respond in love and caring, you're building trust with that person. Yeah. And like you said, that will amount to the person trusting you with more of what they want to say, feeling more safe with you. And then that's when that connection continues to just it gets strengthened. Yeah. And it's a beautiful thing because you can break trust, but you can build it back too.
Right.
by
And
showing.
this is one of those ways.
This is one of those ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the actual, like a practice of active listening. Talk about the reasons why these practices are important, and then we can talk about barriers and other things that this can be used for and to improve in relationships. But I think the main thing that has to happen when you go into an active listening situation is that both parties involved in that need to be aware that that's what you're doing. You cannot active listen without that person understanding that you're there to listen. I think that's really important for that other person to know. Like, you can definitely do it more informally where you're just getting better at listening. But I think for this active listening where you're trying to deepen a relationship through this practice.
So if you're being specifically intentionally trying to deepen a relationship with this practice, that's what you're saying? Because I definitely think you could do active listening like all the time without like saying that. Like you and me do that where we're not like, we're active listening right now.
Right.
We just are.
Yeah, yeah. I get what you're saying. I think it's important in the early stages before you have this practice down to actually make it an active practice where you are telling the person like, hey, tonight, 15 minutes, can we just like sit and hear about each other's day and practice active listening?
I'll say if you do that, that will definitely help you build your relationship like 10x.
Yeah, yeah. That'll 10x your relationship for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's necessary in the early stages.
Yeah.
You know,
we did that kind of.
Yeah, we did that when we were going through the course together, the emotionally healthy course. We were practicing that in a more formal way.
Yeah.
And then I think once you practice that in a formal way, you're able to move into kind of that informality with your listening in the future. As long as you really grasp the concepts, as long as you get those down. But if it's a struggle for you, you need to really get rigid with the practice.
Okay, is that what we're talking about now? Like how you practice that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So I think making sure you make time.
Yeah.
You have to make time for listening. You can't do it in passing. You can't, do it right while the other person's trying to fall asleep. You can't do it. Yeah, she knows. You can't do it in a passive way. It needs to be active, which means there's intention behind it. So you're saying like, hey, I want to make sure that I'm listening to you well, or you don't have to be so over the top with it, but just like, hey, I want to hear about your day. That's a good informal way of coming into active listening. So you guys sit down, you face each other, and this is really important because we don't pay enough attention to body language when we're listening to each other. We know it's happening. Like we know that body language is occurring and we are making mental interpretations of that body language while we're talking to each other.
Yeah.
But we don't, when we sit down for conversations, say to yourself, I'm going to pay attention to my body language during this conversation.
Right.
Because it's going to be a part of how well that person's hearing and I'm receiving information.
And I just want to add to that too. When you do that, like if you have a hard time active listening to begin with, and you decide I'm going to make my body language show that I'm listening, it will help your mind listen too.
Yeah.
Like if you face that person, you stop fidgeting, you stop looking at your phone, you look at the person in the eyes, and you're directed towards them, it's going to help you listen.
Yeah.
Even if like you're used to not doing that well.
Yeah.
Like sometimes when we force our body to do something, it just helps our like mind to go along with it. I found that to be true for me so many times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So make sure you sit down with that person in a specified time that is good for them. And that's really important. Make sure you're timely, which means that it's good for you and it's good for them. So that way you have a productive conversation with them.
And an undistracted
conversation. It can't be a time where you got to be somewhere soon. It can't be a time where you know the kids are about to come home from school. Wait. Wait till you can get an undistracted time to be with that person. And then what you want to do is face them. You want to make eye contact. And that might be a struggle for some people. If that person knows that that's a struggle for you, okay. If it's something you can get past and you can make eye contact, even if it's a struggle, please do it. Because there's something about looking into the other person's eyes when they're speaking that, again, communicates through your body that you're hearing. And it's very, very important to make eye contact. There's so many studies on the importance of eye contact. They know that in business and sales, and it's the same in relationships. It's really important to make eye contact. And then you ask either leading questions, or if that person's just ready to communicate, you let that person talk. You stay silent during the talking, which is a big thing because a lot of times you'll hear something, especially if it's hard, especially if there's conflict, which is a good thing. Conflict is not bad. Conflict is good. Conflict is how you progress in any relationship. If you're not having conflict, you're not actually progressing in the relationship. So let's say it's something that's a little that has some conflict or they're confronting you about something in that time. A lot of times we'll get defensive and we want to react. We'll get defensive and we want to interject. We'll get defensive and we want to make sure that they're telling the whole story, or, they're saying it in a way that, I don't know, maybe there's a part of it that in our defense, we want to make sure our case is represented well.
I think the quietness part of that is what helps us to listen to understand. Because like you're saying, it's human nature. It's natural to want to defend yourself.
Yeah.
So the quietness is where you're saying, no, I'm going to put aside those things and I want to understand why they're saying this.
Yeah.
What do they mean by this? And that's I think that's the hardest part. So if you can practice keeping silent, your lips being closed will help you remember, I'm listening to understand.
Yeah.
Like put down my defenses for now. Let me make sure I understand why this person's upset about this or whatever it is.
And I'm going to go a step further in this. You are not to ask questions until that person is done communicating. That's real hard for me. I want to just be like, well, why are you saying this? I just want to get to the core reason, what's going on inside that's causing you to say this thing.
Yeah.
And what you need to get good at is waiting for that person to get done. And then I'm not even going to get there yet. Let that person communicate in small increments. So let that person, maybe a couple sentences, repeat those sentences. Now we're getting awkward. Repeat those sentences.
This is in those beginning stages when you're practicing.
Right. This is that practice. If you're not good at listening, you got to practice. You won't get better if you don't practice. So what you want to do is you want to receive what that person is saying. You want to repeat back to them. And this is hard, but do it in this way. Repeat as much of what you heard from them back to them in the way that they said it. And by that, I mean the words that they said. Don't change the words. Don't interpret. Don't abridge what they said. Try and repeat exactly what they said back to them.
Can I chime in on why?
Yeah.
This is so important because when you don't think it now, but when you go to do this, you will see that you will want to change the words. When they say something like, that hurt me really bad when you said that thing or whatever. And you're going to say, it made you a little upset when I said that thing. So you just took what they said and
minimized it.
Yeah, you minimized it. You're like, nah, you're hurt. Not really. You're not really that hurt.
Yeah.
That's basically what you're saying to them. And that is going to not be good. It's not going to help you listen to understand. It's not going to help them feel like they're heard by you. So, sorry. I just had to interject. That's why it's important. I know that it was hard for me to do that sometimes because I wanted to make it feel better for me. For me. It wasn't about them. It was for me. We say those things to make ourselves feel better. It doesn't help them feel better when we're listening.
This is where you'll find out if you're good at listening or not. Because what I found in the early stages of doing this was I feel like I'm a really good listener. I'll listen to a podcast, I'll listen to something on YouTube that I hear, and I'll retain a lot of that information. I can regurgitate it in a podcast like this. I can regurgitate it to my wife, and just, that's a terrible way. There needs to be something
I'm like
better.
a baby bird.
Yeah. There has to be a better word than that. Repeat it. We'll just say repeat. I can repeat that information back pretty easily. But what I found is when we would communicate and do active listening, she would say something and I would go back to repeat it. And I realized in that moment how distracted I actually was. Because I couldn't remember. It was only a couple sentences, but I could not remember what she had just said. And that's why the practice is so good, because eventually you're going to get to the point where your mind, you might have clear distractions like your cell phone. You might have clear distractions like the kids or whatever it is that's distracting you from the communication. But your mind is still distracted. Your mind is still going. Your mind is still interpreting. Your mind is still doing all of these things that we need to get over. We need to be able to cross that bridge to where we can actually be present with the people we're in relationship with, because that's how we're going to have the strongest connections and relationships with them. So I'm just going to go through again, because there's a lot that we're talking about. Make time for the listening to take place, for the active listening to take place. When you're in that time, make sure that you sit close together, look at each other, make eye contact if you can. And then I want you to, one, either ask them whatever it is that you're going to be talking about. If there's something that they're coming in with that they want to communicate, they can just go right into it, or you can ask a leading question to get the conversation started. Then when they begin talking, be silent. Listen to what they said. And after they've said a little bit, repeat back to them what they said in the way they said it. And that includes not just the words, but another thing I wanted to say was it includes the feeling behind what they said. So like to what you said, if they're like, man, you really hurt me when you said this thing. If they communicated that in a way that was sad, or had that kind of hurt,
like an emphasis.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That had that feeling of hurt with the words, try and communicate it in that feeling. So they even can know, like, hey, you're empathizing with me in the way that you're repeating back what I said. That's really, really important. And then when they are done communicating whatever they want to communicate to you, and it's really important not to ever direct or
Fish.
Yeah, fish for, try to get out of them what you want to get out of them for whatever conversation you want to have, but to just hear whatever they want to communicate to you. At the end of that, you want to say, is there anything else that you want to communicate to me? Because there might be something that they're afraid to communicate. They might have given you the Cliff Notes and left out the thesis of like, this is the core thing that I really wanted to say, but I'm kind of afraid to say it.
They're testing the waters.
Right. You're giving them permission to be totally open with you, and you're making it a safe place for them to say it. So sometimes you'll really get to the heart of something if you ask that question. Is there anything else that you want to tell me? So you do that. And then if they're like, nope, got it all out, cool. What you want to do after that, out of everything that you told me today, what is the main thing you want me to get out of it?
That's like the second question.
Yeah, that's the second question. If there's nothing else they want to communicate, let them kind of summarize what they just said and said, this is the most important thing. This is the gem from the conversation that I want to stick. I want the part I want to stick with you. Make sure you ask that question. One, it's just nice because if they need to rant, if they need to communicate a lot, sometimes you get done and you're like, I don't even know what we're talking about. So it's really for you, but it also
There's
is.
a spider. Sorry. I am afraid of spiders. Now everyone knows. Okay.
You got it?
It was gonna get me.
I know. It was probably going to eat you.
I actually don't know if I got it, but hopefully I don't see it. I don't see it hanging anymore. Okay, we're good.
All right, we're good. Sometimes you don't know what you were just talking about. No, but you want to make sure that you get that summary from them so that you can go away from the conversation and hold on to that thing. Because if you can bring that up at a later time in the relationship, in your communication, that's really helpful too.
Yeah.
Because it's not just in the conversation that they're feeling heard and known and loved. It's when you can talk about that at a later time and they can, through your recall of that conversation, again, feel heard, known, and loved. It's very, very cool when you actually get into this stuff. And I hope what you're also receiving from this is that when it's done for you, you want to get better at it for yourself. You want to be a better listener because that improves your communication in every relationship. But man, if you can be in a relationship where a person hears you, I hope you're understanding that this can be a two-way street where you feel heard and known and loved. So if you can practice this and you can involve this in every relationship that you're in, what a great feeling for you to be heard, known, and loved.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's life-changing.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It'll better your life. Anything else with that? With the actual practice of how you go through active listening?
No, I think the main takeaway for me is that if you practice it like that, it is work.
Yeah.
It takes time, it takes intentionality, but when you can get good at that, it will become easier to do more on like an informal basis. I don't know if that's the word you want to use, but it'll be easier to do just normally. Yeah. Which I think is what has benefited us the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the main way in which we're able to communicate now is a product of how we did it originally.
Yeah.
Like we went through the awkwardness, we went through the repetitions, we went through the sweating while we're trying to talk to each other because it's awkward, guys. Yeah. I'm not sugarcoating this. It is a different way to talk to somebody. And you might laugh while you're doing it because you're like, this is ridiculous. It is. It is.
Don't give up after the first time.
Well, like in everything, though, how much do you want it?
Yeah.
How much do you want to be a better communicator? How much do you want to have better relationships? You have to answer that question for yourself. If you don't really want better relationships, you're okay with status quo, fine.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same thing with people's with fitness, with anything that's related to self-development in your personal life. You gotta want it first. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's not until there's a problem that you're coming to podcasts like this, you're coming to videos like this where you're looking for solutions. So I hope I'm getting somebody before you need to come to this podcast and you're just like, I just want to improve my life and improve my relationships. Yeah. I hope that's you. Yeah. Probably not, though. You're probably coming here because you struggle with this. You're probably coming here because maybe you've been in relationships where you or the other party struggles with listening.
Yeah. And I mean, to add on to that too, for especially like couples that want to get better at active listening, it's really helpful if you are both on the same page. Like if you both learn about this practice and do it together. One, because it's going to deepen your relationship. It's going to help your relationship so much. But two, it's a safe place to do it. Like it's easier to laugh with your spouse or your significant other about this sort of thing and get better together. And then you're going to be better for everybody else too. Mm-hmm. So like that's how we did it. And it was awkward, but we're married. So it's not like you're doing it with like someone you're not as close with.
Right.
But I'm just saying that because it's helped. I feel like this has helped us be better listeners outside of us too, without having to sit down and do that with like a friend, even though I probably could do that with a friend.
Make it silly. Make it silly.
Yeah.
Make the awkwardness silly. That's a good way to get over awkwardness is to be silly.
Yeah. Just
You
laugh.
know?
Just laugh at yourself.
Just laugh. It's okay. Be like, don't stress over this.
I've known people who've done this though when they did feel like they needed to be heard with their spouse. Like first, like if you can get good at it now when it's not a heavy thing,
Right.
when you need it, and you're like, I actually really need you to hear me out on something. Can we do that active listening exercise? That's going to be really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be really good. And just to go through, this isn't necessarily a conflict resolution tool.
Even though a lot of conflicts can be resolved when you just listen.
Yes.
Well,
That would be the second part of what I was going to say. It's not a conflict resolution tool, especially with conflicts that are big.
yeah.
Especially with
And complicated, yeah.
Right, and that require a better strategy. Yeah, negotiation. But for small conflicts and for, the seeds of conflicts that could develop into potentially a fight down the road, this is a great way to deal with those things and just nip them in the butt early. Like I said, though, conflict's not bad. Conflict is not something to be scared of. It's not something to run from. But you're not running from it. You're actively engaging in it through a practice of listening. So you're not running from something. You're facing it head on, and you're using listening as a tool to deal with it.
Yeah.
So, just be encouraged by that you are getting through the conflict. You are dealing with it in a tangible and powerful way.
Yeah.
So another thing that we just wanted to talk about is just the different barriers that might come up when you are doing active listening. We already talked about distractions. That can come in many forms. That can come in the form of your phone. Even right now during this podcast, my watch has been going off, and I'm like, I need to silence that because I want to be locked into talking to you and to my wife. And so I don't want this going off and distracting me and me losing my train of thought because of it. So if I was doing active listening, I would want to make sure the watch is off or it's silenced to make sure that I'm not, every time the watch vibrates, I'm not thinking about what could that be?
Yeah.
What notification is that? What text message is that?
And it's so easy to look at it too.
Right.
It's like second, what's the word?
Second nature.
Yeah, second nature. You're just
Yeah.
like, and then you see the first glimpse of the text or
And
the email.
as soon as you go like this, that person's checked out. That person's like, oh,
He doesn't
they
care.
care about
Yeah.
that more than me.
Yeah.
It's not true. In most cases, it's not true, but it's felt.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that felt needs are true needs. We have to get over that, well, that's not what I meant. Well, but it's what I felt. And it's not that relationships are built only on feelings. If that was the case, we would be screwed.
Yeah.
But it is a necessary part to engage in when building lasting, deep relationships.
Yeah.
So make sure to eliminate common distractions like that. Like I said, put the dog out. Make sure the kids are taken care of before you engage in active listening.
Any time restraints, you want to stay away from that when you're going to do active listening, because that will, at least for me, it distracts me.
Right.
Like
If I have to
if
be
I know
somewhere.
that I'm going to have a call soon, if I have to be somewhere soon, if I have to do something soon, I have
Yes.
to start dinner soon, whatever it is, I'm not going to be fully there because I'm constantly keeping check of time. I'm like, okay, where are we at time? My attention will not be fully there. So yeah, I think those are the two biggest.
Right. And then the other one is make sure that you get past your preconceived notions, your preconceived judgments, your preconceived go to a lot of times as soon as we're engaged in a conversation with someone especially the people we're close to, we come into those with preconceived notions of what that person's going to say, why they're going to say it, all of these things.
And what they mean. Like when you listen with preconceived ideas in your head, you're listening through a
filter.
A filter that's going to change what the person's saying. Because you're like, oh, like I said before, oh, I know what you mean by that. I know what you mean by that. Actually, you don't know what they mean by that.
Yeah.
You don't know. You didn't let them finish and you haven't asked them.
Right. And this is the idea. There's an idea called differentiation that is big in the kind of psychological world, where we are not each other. We are different people with different ideas, with different values, with different wants and needs, and we are not the same. Especially, and this happens in close relationships where everybody's like, we are one. And it's like, sure, we're one in Christ, but we're not the same person.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we come in with those preconceived ideas, with those judgments on the other person, what we're actually doing is saying, this is the way I would say this, or the reason I would be saying this, or the reason I would be thinking this, or, you know, the reason why I would be saying it in that way.
Yeah.
We're putting ourselves on that other person instead of allowing them to be them and hearing them for who they are.
Yes.
And that's a really difficult thing because we get in this weird kind of united, especially if we're in relationship with somebody, we're one person and we're not. And that's so not beautiful.
Yeah.
Really, the beauty comes when you're able to value and love and cherish that person for them and not who they are with you. That's a very, very important thing to also not bring into your active listening, which just goes to the last thing that I'll say is making sure that you're not thinking of your response.
Yeah.
While you're listening to that person. That's so easy for me to do. I'm that type of person. I want a good zinger. I want a good zinger. I want a good solution. I want to help. A lot of times it comes from a good place. I just want to help. I just want to make sure that my wife or my kids feel like I was able to find a solution for them.
Yeah.
So it comes from a good place, but it's not actually helpful for the things that we're actually trying to achieve through active listening, which is heard, known, loved.
Yeah.
You're not gonna, if you're thinking of a response, my wife knows when I'm checked out. And not necessarily checked out, when I'm thinking of responses. Yeah. Like, cause I'll be staring at her, but I'm like, you know, I'm pulling a JD Vance, just, you know, I'm looking through them because my mind is somewhere out in the universe and not right here. So that's just, those are the barriers that you just want to be aware of when you're doing active listening so that you can do it well. And then let me see, is there anything else?
For distractions.
I don't think there's anything else for distractions. Those are the major ones to just look out for. We kind of went through, you know, ways to improve your active listening. The biggest thing to come to is staying mindful and staying present.
Yeah.
All of those eliminating distractions are for that purpose, ultimately, is that you can be in the same room with that person, both physically and mentally. So that means having the right body language means that you're present with them physically. Being free of distractions means you're present with them mentally.
Yeah.
And it's just very, very important. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, you know, we talked about all of this, which is really helpful, but I don't, like, should we talk about how, you know, you let them speak, you do this active listening exercise, but then at the end, if you do have questions, how do you go about that? You just ask them like normal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I would do those two things that I talked about at the end. So one, making sure, is there anything else that you want to say?
Yeah.
Making that safe place for them. Two, out of all the things you said, summarize it for me. What's the main thing you want me to get out of this? Because a lot of it's a dump. You know, we know this if we've ever had to just share something that was on our hearts with someone. You do a lot of dumping.
Yeah.
And in there is like a little bit. Ooh, I got a ladybug on me. It's a very buggy house.
It is.
But the main thing is getting to the main point that they were trying to communicate.
Pepper's eating it.
Did she just eat it?
Yeah, she did.
Ew. That's so gross.
She like licked it and then she's like, she ate it.
Ew. Oh, don't lick me. Ugh. Ladybugs smell awful. Ew, no.
She got rid of it for us. She's a good girl.
No. All right. But then after you get through those two things, then I think questions are totally okay.
Right. As long as you can listen to understand through those as well.
Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it a little more, though, I would put a caveat in. Maybe the questions that you have could be talked about in a future active listening setting. And the reason I'm saying this is because that defensiveness
is going to come back up.
Most of the time through our questions. We think we're just saying, you know, I just have a few questions about what you say. No, you don't.
Yeah.
You just want to poke holes in whatever thing that they're trying to communicate.
Yeah.
Let them be heard. Let them be felt and known by you more than your need to be right, more than your need to kind of figure out how we're going to fix what they said, how we're going to interject our opinion on what they said.
It's almost like you need to have if there's like a conflict in there, like that's like a different tools you need to use.
Yeah.
Right? If it's not just active listening.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's other tools that we'll teach in the future that might be more beneficial than you asking questions.
Yeah. Because it's going to turn into a fight.
I think it will. I think it will. I don't if it's something that is kind of benign, that isn't really.
If you actually just want to know more of their heart, that's different.
Especially if they're just sharing information and it's not something that conflicts with your relationship at all. Ask away. If it does, though, I would say put those questions on hold. There are some other tools that I would give you to go pursue kind of understanding for yourself personally on maybe why you have those questions. Just to make sure when you ask those questions, it's coming from a place that you've actually thought through what you're saying. And it's not just lashing out because of a feeling that you have from what they said.
Yeah.
That's really important.
So some examples of like positive questions.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we slowly have and are getting better at this, but asking in questions to just like understand better. Like when you go to ask, like, why do you think you thought that? Mm-hmm. And
that's a good one.
Those sorts of questions. Why do you think that made you feel that way? Or what were you thinking when you said that or when you did that? Things like that where you're just asking because you want to know personally or you want to help them understand what's going on.
Yep.
Like I feel like you've done that a couple times where you've asked questions and they've been very insightful and I had to think about the answer. You know, like you listened so well that I had to think like, why did I think that?
Right.
Or how do I feel about that?
No, I'm just kidding.
So yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think questions are valuable. Intention behind the questions is more valuable to the relationship.
Yeah.
So just make sure that they're purposed to deepen your relationship, not to cut, not to poke, not to prod, because you'll waste all the work that you did during the active listening.
There's no winning. There's no winning.
No, I want you to win in the relationship, even if you have to fight another day. Sometimes fighting another day is a win for the relationship.
Right.
So just make sure you have the right intentions when you are doing these practices. But all right, well, let's let's wrap this up. I'm going to give you just kind of a quick synopsis of how to practice active listening so you can just take this right now to whatever relationship that you're in. First, you want to make a time to do the active listening, to be with that person and hear them out, or for them to hear you out. Then what you want to do is you want to sit down with them. You want to face them. You want to make sure that your body language is in a way that is focused on them and distraction free. You want to make eye contact so they know that they are seen by you, because you're looking into the depths of their soul through that. And that makes a person feel known. So that's a really good thing if you can do it. I know some people struggle with it, but if you can make eye contact, do that. And then I want you to either ask a leading question like, hey, what do you want to tell me today? Or how was your day? It can be as simple as that. Let that person talk. After they say a few sentences, you can pause them and say, let me repeat this back to you, just so that they know you heard what they said so far. Then you repeat that back to them in the best way that you can, as long as you are at least getting most of what they said in the words that they said and in the feeling that they said it in, with the emotion that they said it with. Repeat that back to them. Then after that, at the very end, when they have said everything that they want to say, because there will come a point where someone's done, where they don't even know, they felt so heard by you, they don't even know what to say anymore. That's the thing. A lot of us go through life and we have this like pent up, like I haven't actually been able to communicate what I want to say. You do this active listening, that person will be quiet at the end because they said everything that they've been wanting to say to you and you were there to receive it now. So you do that at the end. You say those two questions. Is there anything else that you want me to know? And then after that, out of everything you said, what is the main thing you want me to take away from this conversation? That's where most active listening ends. After you receive those two things from a person, you're done. Either you switch up and then they listen to you, or you're done. You heard that person, they felt heard, known, and loved. You're good. You're good. Or if it's not conflict related, you ask follow-up questions. So when you said this, can you just give me a little more insight into what you meant? Maybe you were confused on something. And a lot of times you'll go back and ask questions like that. And the person's like, I said that? I don't even remember. I was just dumping, And so it'll bring more and better and greater clarity to your conversation and ultimately to the relationship. Because that's why we do all of this. This is a communication tool, but ultimately is a relationship tool. It is something that will deepen your relationship. Anything else that you wanted to say with this?
No, I just think it's a very helpful tool if you want to deepen your relationships, but also just be a better friend and parent and spouse in general. Yeah. Yeah.
So try this out. If you do this practice, I would love to know how it goes. So you can leave a comment below. You can email us. Just let us know how it went. You can reply to a random social media post you see from it. However you want to communicate with us, I would love to hear your stories of how active listening played a part in your relationships. If it was super awkward and you got a funny story, I want to hear about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, communicate with us. We would love to hear from you. What were you going to say?
We want your questions as well. If you have any questions about this video, or you have follow-up questions about something we talked about but didn't go into, please just put it in the comments, and so that we can address it at some point. Yeah.
Cool. We'll see you on the next episode. We love you all. Goodbye.